I felt so much inadequacy, inferiority as a kid. I had this great world, this great life, but something in me felt inferior and inadequate. And I struggled a lot. I struggled as a teenager, I know you did as well, with a lot of depression and suicidal depression at times. And it was, I didn't know what it was from. It wasn't the context of my life. When we see our grandparents and the constellation, each of our parents' lives, we broaden the context and we have more compassion.
What is an easy way for someone to start?
I would say actually that it is very intuitive. I think it starts with some interest. So we're basically drawing our family tree, and then we're finding out more about them, like where was the addiction issues? What were the occupations? Were there family that left and fled? Did a great-grandfather go to Russia while the family went to Argentina? So those pieces we can track. Follow your interest. Ask the elders, ask your grandparents, ask your parents, what do they know? What stories were they told? And I really encourage people, because people can go to 60 years old and they haven't asked those questions. And the elders, the grandparents have died and those stories didn't necessarily get passed on. It's oral tradition. So I really encourage everyone to ask.
Welcome to the Human Recovery Lab, where science-backed ideas meet real human stories about how life's hardest moments can become our healthiest comebacks. Michael.
Omar.
Welcome to the Better Perspectives Show.
Glad to be here with you.
It's very special to have you in this room, with all these beautiful people. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. We'll be talking about multigenerational trauma. That's a specialty of yours. You're just telling me about a session, and that's what you do for work. And we hear a lot about it now in the media. It seems to be a very interesting or a topic of great interest with the way we're seeing the world and a world of reactivity. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. How are you feeling today?
I feel a buzzing in my body, I feel like energy I feel thrilled actually to be here and with everyone and feel our collective. We've settled in already some, and I'm real happy to have this conversation with you to continue our dialogues and our inquiries and our revelations. So excited to be here. Yeah.
And before we do all that, you recommended that we start with even more settling and grounding. And I would love to invite you to lead us through a meditation.
Wonderful.
Where we can allow all the ancestors with us in the room from all the different parts of the world to be with us before we start this conversation. So.
Wonderful, yeah. So I want to invite everyone to just allow yourself to soften your eyes. You can have soft eyes, or your eyes can close as you wish. And if your eyes are open, we can look around the space, or we can feel around the space, and being here together in this collective. And wherever anyone who's listening to this is, just please allowing yourself also to be here with us and sense us together. And sensation is where we begin, our body nature. And so I invite us to just allow ourselves to drop into sensations. Whatever energy is flowing in you, what it's like to sit, what's happening with your feet and your hands, these gifts that we've been given, in our eyes, what's happening in our fluid system. Sensations are in the present, we can notice. This place, this time. And sensing also what's in your heart emotionally. What are you bringing in? What are you carrying from the day? What's happening in the context of your lives? And noticing what arises in your awareness. Perhaps who arises, Maybe images, maybe places. And I invite us to float back in time. We can almost imagine from above our heads, like water that's pouring down along our spines, and letting that water fall into us and fall back with us in time to source, to the pools. The pools that swim in us and the generational pools that source us, source our lives. So we can go back perhaps to our own births, to the context that we were born in, our parents, our siblings, our relatives and family, our communities, the places that we were born into. And just noticing what arises as we go back further in time to our parents' birth places, parents' migrations that they came from, their places, their parents. Just inviting in grandparents, great-grandparents, and seeing who shows up, who shows up. And we can send thanks back in time. We can send honoring back in time to all those that came before us and went through their lives, their celebrations, their anguish, their ordeals, their liberations, their joy. And we just send back in time thank yous. Those that we might find more difficult in our consciousness, we can send them back healing, compassion. And we'll come into slowly we'll come back from our generational lineage, we'll track our lineages from deeper roots into these trees we are, into these branches that we are, into these fruits that we're here, right? To these lives that we live that are rich. And we come back here to the room, slowly allowing ourselves to just notice each other, notice the space. Yeah, so we'll begin that way. And whatever you noticed, just bring that in your harvest basket along and we'll have time to share.
Thank you for that. I'm feeling so many emotions. I don't know where to start. I'm trying to come back from my grandfather's life and my parents' memories to me and being an interviewer, and remembering my current role in this moment.
Maybe share your grandfather's, like we shared the story of Dudu.
Dudu, yeah.
Maybe you can share your story first.
Yeah. You're changing the script. I love that. Yeah, he was the person that I was thinking about. My grandfather is a very creative individual. He was also an army general, but he was a photographer and a writer. And my dad is a surgeon, so he's always been very much a person who achieves a lot and has like always raised the bar for me and pushed me to be better. And my grandfather gave me a different flavor of life, where it was very a lot of storytelling and a lot of observation. And he was in a phase in his life where I was growing up where he had a lot of more time and space. And my grandma was the complete opposite. He used to call her the government. And we'd be sitting around doing all sorts of wacky stuff with my grandpa, and he'd be like, the government is coming, the government is coming. The government gets whatever the government wants. And she was very tight. She was very much a person who was always on the dot with things, very healthy physically. However, she struggled with a lot of mental health issues, and that's been a huge part of what I have been unpacking and why this topic has been personally interesting to me, because she passed away after 10 years of dementia, and she had a lot of anxiety and stress, and my grandfather was kind of the opposite of that. So it's interesting to kind of unpack that, and talking to you about it has always been eye-opening, and I'd love to share more. However, I will return to my role as an interviewer.
Well, that story resonates in me, and I imagine the story resonates in all of us in some ways. And how that resonates in me is that my father, similar and different than what Omar shared about your father, steady, grounded, earthy, salt of the earth. So my father's name is Avram Gelbart, and Art Gelbart, and he's still with us. He's 95, and I reverence and love him so deeply. And his story is that he moved already. He was born in a shtetl called Klebutsk in southwestern Poland, and shtetl, who was the kosher butcher, he was of his family, served the village. He'd go with my dad, they'd choose out the cows in the neighboring town, and my dad would measure who was the heftiest cow. And Mordechai was my grandfather's name. I'm named after him. So my dad and I greet each other, Mordechai ben Avraham. I go, Avram ben Mordechai. I can say son of. In the Jewish tradition, we say the son of. So we have this lineage. I feel this very strong lineage from my father to my grandfather.
And I'm very curious to kind of trace that whole story. And I want to ask you first, why did we start with this meditation? And what is the better perspective that you're hoping people leave with today, both in the audience and those that will be listening to this in the future, about generations? Why are the stories of earlier generations important?
Thanks for asking. I've been tracking lineage now. And so tracking lineage back in time, certain medicine journeys I've had, different medicines that have helped me to track back in time and speak with my ancestors, speak with my grandparents. So 3 of my grandparents didn't survive the Holocaust, the Shoah, it's called, and I've spoken with them. It's like, if you haven't heard someone's voice, how do you know them? Yeah. And on ayahuasca and deep in the jungle of Peru, I heard them speak to me. And basically, they're like, we're all right, don't suffer over us. Don't torture yourselves, And then I have a relationship with each one where I do believe that one of the keys is sending thanks and sending thanks and sending thanks back in time. Just thanking them, just honoring them, just remembering them, just treasuring whatever we know or don't know of them. We can send that back in time, and that's a portal, right? That's where the blessings can come through, right? And remembering and honoring, and that's transformed my life. That really has. So the meditations are somatic. Someone said about in our bodies, we know, someone said something tonight, and it's invisible. Like, we don't have the explicit stories. We have some explicit stories, right, of who our ancestors, grandparents, great-grandparents were, where they came from, the villages, the occupations and such. But so much is implicit. It's hidden in our tissues, and it's findable. Right? And the more we find that, the more we can feel the context of our backgrounds, literally, right? So backgrounds being a way to really track back and resource somatically and information that's wider, that's available than hyperfocus. Trauma lands in hyperfocus. We're on the screens, or we're like this, whereas it's limited in information. Whereas somatically speaking, there's more information available when we're more deeply relaxed and settled. So.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I'm excited to go further into the practical ways where one can do that. But first, we always start by asking our guests to share a story. However, today I'll ask you to share your parents' story. And when we first met, we dove really deep into it really quickly, and I was captivated by it and how you've been able to transform that, not just through your life, but now for the people that you work with as what you do for a living. So yeah, let's go back to your dad's story and tell us a little bit about both your parents, what brought them to the moment to conceive you, and we'll go from there.
Great. I'll do the best synopsis I can here. So my father, born in a shtetl, kibbutz, farm land, with a pretty large family, and 3 sisters. And when the onslaught from the Nazis came, they went to that village right away and shot the strongest uncle. And the family was impacted in all kinds of ways, right? And so my dad was able to find his way to a work camp called Blachemer, where he got this concentration camp number. And then on a death march to Buchenwald in the early 1945, and then was liberated from Buchenwald. And I've asked him if he feels like a victim, and he says no. And he says, I got a bonus life. So that's my dad in a synopsis. And he came to America. He learned English in the U.S. Army, as well as learning about baseball. Bob Feller and the Indians were winning the last pennant at the World Series the Indians ever won. And his sense of humor is tremendous. So I'll share that. Now, he met my mother in a bakery in Cleveland, Ohio. So
well, first, kudos to him for learning about baseball. It's been 13 years for me in America. I still have no idea.
We're still waiting for a World Series, too.
Good job.
So my mother was 4 when the Anschluss happened, and she came from more of a city called Kalisz. And her mother and father were manufacturing shoes. They were having a business, entrepreneurial, and doing pretty well. We actually went in '86. I saw the place they lived in. It was pretty palatial by modern standards. And her father, Yosef, and her mother, Sura, they fled. They were ghettoized in a ghetto called Rzeszów. And Rzeszów is on the border now between Ukraine and Poland. And a NATO base is there right now. And there was a Jewish ghetto that they were concentrated in. And my grandmother knew that the ghetto was being liquidated the next day. And so she put money in my mother's and jewels in my mother's jacket, and she pushed her under a fence to give her to a Polish woman. And my mother, bless her heart, screamed, cried, and the Polish woman took the money, took the jewels, put her back under the fence. And the last memory she has of her father is going in and sitting on his lap, and she says, Rosa. And then her mother comes in the room and turns white, and they escape. They leave. Somehow they made a decision, my grandmother and grandfather, to leave him back. He had dark hair, and they were blonde. And so she was a hidden child in Warsaw then for 5, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. And a Polish woman and her father, Polish woman's father, Adam Jacques and Hanka saved my mother's life. Like they pretended to be not Jewish. And she'd have to, freeze if someone said Juden, and couldn't acknowledge her mom because she was in danger of doing that. So lived in farmhouses, closets, and was able to survive. And the Russians came in and liberated them. And she remembers playing Hungarian Rhapsody by heart and learning music at that time. Went to Munich to school, the Haganah, the Israeli organization, whisked her off from Poland, from the east, from the other side of the Iron Curtain, and took her to Munich, and she went to school, came to Cleveland. So that's the story of their survival.
So they both survived in their own ways, and then they made it to America separately.
Right, and I grew up in northeastern Ohio, Cleveland. There, in Holocaust world, is that there were hubs of immigration, of migration, and Kansas City, Los Angeles, of course, Israel was a hub, Australia. So families were sent to different. Look at Chicago, New York, those were places. So they met in Cleveland, and I grew up with thousands of Holocaust survivor and their families, and in a town called Beechwood. Ironically, Beechwood was misspelled with an A. There's no beaches, there are beech trees. And Buchenwald means, Buchen is beach and Wald is a forest. So that's liberation from Buchenwald to Beechwood, my father's journey. So they gave us everything. They didn't burden us with the stories. I had a great childhood, so much fun, like swimming and bicycle riding everywhere. I mean, they really created lives for us, and birthday parties. And my dad's 3 sisters all survived. He didn't know if they had.
So I'm curious, like what would you attribute them not burdening you with their stories? Like they've been through a lot. Their stories are really easy to be amplified, and at the same time, they don't have access or the curiosity, I guess, that generation like we do for things like ayahuasca ceremonies. I don't know if they've done any, or you think they've done any.
I don't think so.
I didn't think
so
either.
They each have their own healing journeys, but
yeah, what do you think attributes to them like being able to kind of just move on?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Be the first to know about new content, events, and our 3-month program by signing up at thehumandash.com/subscribe. And while you're there, you can take the Human Dash assessment. It's free, science-backed, and it shows you how stress and habits are shaping your health right now.
Giving their children lives, creating families, creating community. A very strong community that really is super resilient. That they were in the crafts, in the trades, and my father's still selling floor coverings since 1965, still, and just resilience, like sense of humor, playfulness, very dynamic. My mother's super dynamic. I would say it was education and giving us childhoods that they didn't have, and education of us learning. Then we became professionals of our generation, and still a very successful neighborhood. Beechwood is 85% Jewish. It became this enclave, like a shtetl, like a village, but more modern. So
if we fast forward, you grew up in Beechwood, and at some point you realized that you want to individuate, you want to move on. Like, what was the transition point? What was the journey that you took on yourself?
Well, I would say that what I internalized was my mother's nervous system, like her wiring. Like, think about when we're in the laps of our moms, we're absorbing their nervous systems, their neurowiring. And I just, osmosis just became a lot, very enmeshed and very wired, connected to my mom. And so we absorbed trauma, right? That was visceral. When I was 5, my grandmother, Stella, had electroshock, and I think about I was in her lap watching Ed Sullivan Show and Wonderful World of Disney, and she wasn't quite fully there. So again, these impressions, right, are very powerful. And
What about your dad? What do you think you took from him?
piss and vinegar, defiance. He's like, my son's defiant. My grandfather was defiant. My grandfather, Mordecai, refused to stop being a kosher butcher, and the Nazis took him away and tried him for that. We found the legal papers of the prosecution in the Holocaust Museum.
Huh. I
So
find that
defiance. My dad would sit in the synagogue. My dad was like, so where was God? So where was God? Like there's just this chutzpah. Like my uncles, badass uncles, my aunt's husbands, they were fucking iron. You couldn't, he's like, my dad would look at me, I was like, okay, got it. You know, my mom would look at me, I'm like, yeah, what you got? You know, it was just a difference in the lineages that we have, again, with the paternal, the maternal, and how that's wired into us and how that combines, yeah. And what attributes we receive genetically and epigenetically in our personality patterns. So
what strikes me about how you're talking about it is that there's this defiance, this chutzpah, this gumption, which is one of my favorite words. And that's usually not what we think about when we think of multigenerational trauma or epigenetics. Like we're thinking about the trauma, we're thinking about the things that we took. We're trying to kind of rationalize maybe how we act with what happened, which is part of the journey. But you're also seeing the kind of like the gold, the things that they've acquired through the hardship.
Yeah. Well, my aunts and my uncles all died like 10, 15 years ago. And my mom is just this engine. It's like, it's just keeps my dad going. And lifiness, very lifey. I mean, they're in 95 and 90 and they're still very social and very out there and funny. I tell you a Holocaust joke if you want. My dad, okay, I gotta tell you this one. So my dad, you know why my dad
There's
left?
anyone that is okay to say a Holocaust joke, I think that's you.
I think so, you know. He's like, he comes home to the, you know, I'm there with them visiting. He's like, so Rose, they didn't have organic bananas and oranges. That's why I left Buchenwald. They weren't serving organic food.
There wasn't any lemon pie, clearly.
Clearly. Vigor. Just like, you know, made of steel. I mean, the more I think that's true of trauma. It's like when we really go through it and we don't turn away from it, we can actually derive so much meaning and so much understanding and so much compassion for each other, right? Because we all have our versions of traumas. It's not the trauma Olympics. Sometimes we compare, but we all have our own lineages, and it's so important to honor each of our own.
So let's segue into your current work right now. What does the word resourcing mean, and how does it relate to this conversation about multigenerational trauma?
Yeah, well, in somatic experiencing and various kinds of trauma healing work, Thomas Hubel's work has been very significant. The resourcing is being able to access our own ground and our own embodiment so that we're connected here. And so that we're able to be a container, right? Our bodies, our temples, and our being can rest in us so that we can be grounded for whatever activations occur. So the notion of vortex and counter vortex. So we can be activated by someone else's story, right? Vicariously. There's so much collective, vicarious trauma that's going on in our world, just, right? And so we're feeling all that, and so important to be grounded, steady, stable conductors.
So when we feel triggered by either something inside of us or someone else, that's a vortex?
Yeah, so
That's
the
us getting
activation.
into the vortex. Okay.
Yeah, so the sympathetic activation takes us into survival mechanisms, right? The flight, fight, freeze, fawn, frantic, those kind of ways that we strategize, our nervous system strategizes for survival. And so regulation, a lot of what I work on with people is the window of tolerance or regulation, to be able to stabilize ourselves so we're not acting out or dysregulated and unable to have a good conversation. It's like a couples conflict. I do a lot of intimacy and couples work. It's not going to be a good conversation if someone is activated into vortex. There needs to be a grounding mechanism for that. So how we resource?
Yeah, well, I'm curious to know, like, how can someone actively figure out what their counter vortex is? Like, how do I figure out what grounds me? How do I figure out what the counter
I would say
is?
it's less figuring out and more experiencing. So we have to find our way home. What was that poem we had earlier about the thread and finding the thread, not the parade? You know, that it's Ariadne's thread in the Minotaur's cave. Like, we have to find the thread back into our anchoring and our stability so we can be stable for each other. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's counter vortex or resourcing, right, comes in as a pendulation. So if I'm activated, I need to be able to ground. And so touch is a resource, eye contact is a resource, hugging is a resource, stretching, there's music. So there are all kinds of ways in which we can recenter ourselves, right, to find our steadiness and then address the trauma stuff. If we address the trauma stuff and it's overwhelming, then we re-traumatize. And so that's why parents don't necessarily tell their trauma stories, or grandparents don't necessarily burden others. Now, some of that, when someone asked the question before, is like, you don't want to burden a child with trauma stories, right? 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, kids can start to develop and hear the stories and start to process those. Especially when the parents or the grandparents haven't healed their trauma. They're passing it on, they're passing on the trauma and putting burden on the children. So sometimes parents don't tell because they don't want to put that, they're protecting themselves and their children. So that pendulation is so important to come into the grounding and then be able to address, you know, what got activated in you when I told my mother's story. Like, I'm sure that evoked your own ancestry, traumas deep back in time, images. So important to recognize when we're in trauma, like when we're in activation. How do we notice that? What are some signals that we notice? Can we ask everyone?
Well, things that come to mind are like physical sensations such as like palpitations or my heart rate rising or temperature or my face flushing, right? Or maybe memories. And so you mentioned like some of the ways that we can nurture ourselves through a storm or a vortex are like skills like, you know, breathing, vagal activation, touch, you mentioned touch. And what fascinates me about the way that you see things is also that it's again this resourcing from our ancestors. So again, back to my grandparents, I feel like I've taken a lot of this anxiety from my grandma, who never dealt with her anxiety, and then it was passed on to my mom, who was avoiding dealing with her anxiety. And here I am, like feeling socially anxious at a young age and not knowing where it's coming from, and then feeling bad about feeling bad. And a big thing that I have found for myself, for instance, is writing. And I never thought of it as a counter vortex until you explained what a counter vortex is. And this writing is something that I take from my grandpa.
Yeah.
Who they regulated each other in that way. So it's really interesting to think of like the practical things, but also going in with that like bigger generational perspective and resourcing from it's like going into the archives and bringing in also the treasures and using
Beautiful
them.
way to say that.
Yeah.
Beautiful way to say that. Accessing Dudu has been a healing for you, and
Yes.
in that lineage and an ability to see your mother. I mean, when we see our grandparents and the constellations of each of our parents' lives, we broaden the context and we have more compassion for our parents, like what they've gone through. We can bring more healing and forgiveness to them by understanding more of what they were born into.
Yes.
Like your grandmother's family so deeply impacted your grandmother. And your grandfather came in as a steady, stable conductor for her,
Yes.
balancing that system.
Yes. And then they've both passed away, but these two energies are in me all the time. And not accessing the counter vortex doesn't make the vortex go away. I think it's also just always just recognizing and nourishing, like you said.
Well, that can be actually healed
Really?
substantially. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the more we access the healing resources, like
We're all listening.
well, like my grandfather Mordecai, like in accessing him, he doesn't approve of me eating bacon. I'm like, come on, Grandma. You know, kosher butcher. So there's a certain sternness I feel with him. And I have a dialogue with him. Like, so I'm healing something in that lineage between us. And my grandmother Liba, I feel her as unconditional love. When I access her energy, Lev is the name Hebrew for heart, I feel unconditional love with her. And that's healing energy. That's a resource that lives in me. My grandfather Yosef, my mother's father, I feel unconditional approval from him. When I connect with him, I just feel like he's thankful to me. Like I feel thanks coming from my ancestors. And that just lives in me. Like we have to heal the trauma fully. And the accessing of the lineages helps us to do that, but it's difficult. It's like going into the cave of the Minotaur, you know, so we have to be courageous and we need each other. So, you know, who is it that went into the cave? Was that in the Odyssey, Ulysses? And he needed his allies. We need our allies. We need each other. You know, that's ventral vagal resourcing. This is resourcing. Laughter is resourcing. Tea time is resourcing. Lemon pie is definitely resourcing. And that's how we heal.
That's incredible and gives me a lot of hope. Thank you for sharing that. It's really inspiring to see someone that has been doing this work for 4 decades. And well, I guess you've been exploring it in your own story for probably even longer than that. But to know that there isn't necessarily an end goal, but it gets better the more we explore. So thank you for challenging that perspective.
Thank you. And the way you're talking about your writing and our expressing, whether it's expressing through our music or it's expressing through our poems. Like I'm a mover. I mean, for me, moving is, I've been a dancer in this in our dance world for decades, and that's very much been a part of my liberation healing path. And I feel when I'm dancing, I'm dancing them.
Yeah.
Like I feel them in my feet, I feel them in my hands, I feel them in my spine. It's like, there's more of us when we're really letting that energy, moving that energy through.
Yeah.
But the tricky part, I think, with telling the trauma stories, right, is not re-traumatizing or traumatizing someone else. Right? Someone can start telling you about their trauma, or we read about something and it's like,
Yes.
we get that vicarious trauma that's from unhealed stories. So
we're seeing that en masse now, I would imagine more than any other time, because we are lonelier than ever, and we are consuming information that is keeping us stuck in that re-trauma cycle more than ever.
Yeah.
And it's really easy for people to say things also behind a screen rather than in community. So I love how you brought it back to us being able to help each other through that. It's a big part of why we want to do this format, where there's people in the room and we're having this conversation in a group.
There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of disconnectedness. I think of it like people have lost their souls and they don't know where they are. They've lost themselves. And they haven't necessarily been supported and guided to find themselves. And So also shame is a huge emotion. With trauma, shame is one of the keys, really, because trauma is embodied as shame. We internalize. I felt so much inadequacy, inferiority as a kid. I had this great world, this great life, but something in me felt inferior and inadequate. And I struggled a lot. I struggled as a teenager, I know you did as well, with a lot of depression and suicidal depression at times. And it was I didn't know what it was from. It wasn't the context of my life so much, but so the shame, healing the shame and unburdening ourselves from that is really huge. Internal family systems, I play with that. I've been doing that in my own way for decades. You take the shame and you put it out somewhere and you have a dialogue with it to unburden ourselves from that. And it's inherited. My mother has so much shame that she felt. My dad, that lineage of when we get traumatized like that, and genocides, and we internalize that as shame. The ones that should be feeling the shame aren't. The ones that are abused feel the shame. And so de-shaming and putting it out there. Also, if we have ancestors, by the way, that were like really nasty, we may have had abusers in our background. We may have had mean, hostile, violent people in our backgrounds. Like we all have histories that weren't just they were awesome people. And that I love what Resma Menakem says in My Grandmother's Hands. If you haven't read that, I really recommend. Krista Tippett does an interview with him that's superb. That Resma Menakem, we'll get that, but that there's dirty trauma and clean trauma, and that dirty trauma gets passed on, and we clean up our trauma. We wind up having to clean up others' trauma because we've been burdened by it, and that's the work. That's the work I've dedicated myself to. And the more we heal up and clean up our trauma, what we've inherited, the more we can help someone else heal. Because we're coming from more of a healthy, place of compassion. It isn't like but denial and avoidance of the trauma. Because avoidance, flight is like, no, 10-foot, I don't want to talk about Holocaust stuff. But others are like, yeah, I want to make films about it. I want to write about it. I want to tell stories about it. And others are ambivalent. So we all have our strategies when it comes to the generational stuff that we've inherited. It's important to respect all those strategies we employ. The flight strategy is helpful. The numbness and freezing. My mother, we had a documentary made on our family. I can link us up.
Please.
A couple of years ago, the CBS, it was cool. Viacom, my parents, I was in it. My son got a tattoo of my father's concentration camp number, and was in the film with his arm next to my father, right, with their, so that's lineage.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. A lot of us consume content but find it hard to integrate it back into our daily lives. If you're ready to go beyond listening and actually rebuild your health, join us at The Human Way. It's my step-by-step interactive course to help you recover body and mind after a hard time. Start today and begin your comeback at thehuman-.com/course. I'll see you there.
I'd like to switch gears to a topic that I know is close to both of us that I've been unraveling also, which is a big part of the story that brought us all to this moment is migration and immigration. And trauma is frequently involved in that, whether it is someone who's like a refugee or like escaping something like the Holocaust, or a war or famine or any of these things. But also trauma involves just leaving everything and moving. And you talked a little bit about the kind of migration patterns and how that may turn into occupation patterns and the relationship between what we do for work and where we've traveled from or where our parents have traveled from and our trauma. Like how can we think of these things in conjunction with each other?
Yeah, Again, I would use the word tracking. We're tracking the lineage of movements. Like we can think of all the different houses and cities that we've lived in, and we can track that back in time. I can track my mom's lineage back to Kalisz and what that was like for hundreds of years for Jews in Poland. We lived in Poland for 700 years, our people. So tracking that back is via a sense of the land. I'm in a cohort with people that are from Eastern Europe in the Thomas Hubel world. And we connect. There's a woman in Warsaw, when I talk with her, it's like, I know her. She's not Jewish. She grew up and grandfather was, same place that my grandmother was in. And when I see her, I start to cry. It's like I feel the connection with Eastern Europe deeply. And so we can track that and feel the lands. We can feel the villages. Maybe we've gone back in time to visit, where our ancestors came from. We can smell the smells. We can see the sky. And that's a way we can really, memories can return. And pieces of the mosaic of the puzzle can come to us that way. Occupation, similarly. Like there was a time I started telling the story about my grandfather Mordechai being a kosher butcher in the family. My mother said, it wasn't a kosher butcher. They ran the butcher shop. Yeah, okay. Anyway. And as if that was something shameful. There's that, like how we feel about those professions. Right? I said, Mom, her father he was a shoemaker. Said, no, he wasn't a shoemaker. They manufactured shoes. So the pride that my mother has around that, and the shame that defending against any belittling. My mother's tough. So occupations, like, how do we feel about the occupations of what our parents did? Do we feel pride in it? Or grandparents, do we feel shame about it? Do we feel like, ooh, that was exciting? Like your grandfather, So that's affect, right? It's our emotions and how we sense our relationship with those professions. Like I didn't become a carpet salesman, floor covering guy, but I'm proud as hell of my dad and what he's accomplished. So we can track those lineages back, like a shtetl. What was it like to grow up in shtetls in 18th century Poland, 19th century Poland? Like we can imagine it. We can go back to the villages. I've gone back and imagined being in the village of my father's kibbutz and having celebrations and dances and celebrating birthdays and holidays. And it was in one of these meditations that I was leading. And so next day I said, Dad, so I had this image of dancing with your relatives and your cousins in kibbutz. And he goes, oh, well, they would come on Saturday nights and we would have dances and we would sing songs and we would play. I'm like, that's the kind of synchronicities that occur. And I'm sure those are occurring here in the room. I'm super stoked to be hearing all of our stories.
So a lot of people in the room, and I'm sure a lot of people that will ultimately be listening to this, have not necessarily explored any of this stuff before in their own families. Whereas maybe some have found a way, but it's not very intuitive, I would imagine, to go up to your grandma and ask her about her trauma, for instance, let alone the fact that we have access to all of our families. So what is an easy way for someone to start this path of inquiry?
I would say actually that it is very intuitive. I think it's a calling. I think it starts with some interest. Like, doing a genogram, a genealogy is one way in to start to track the systems and the patterns.
So a genealogy, can you define what
that is? So we're basically drawing our family tree, and then we're finding out more about them. Like, where was the addiction issues? What were the occupations? Were there, family that left and fled? Did a great grandfather go to Russia while the family went to Argentina? So those pieces we can track. Now, some people are really interested in this stuff. People who are here today, and I imagine many of the people here are interested. So follow your interest. Ask the elders. Ask your grandparents. Ask your parents. We don't have to talk so much about our childhoods with them, because it can be great, but it also can be not as informative as asking about their grandparents. What do they know? What stories were they told? So inviting them to share is immense. And I really encourage people, because people can go to 60 years old and they haven't asked those questions. And the elders, the grandparents have died and those stories didn't necessarily get passed on. It's oral tradition. So I really encourage everyone to ask. And if you need guidance around that, just ask that, hey, who are the grandparents? Who were your grandparents like? What was their childhood? Where were they from? Like really kind of matter of fact, like you can set it up as a formal interview, or you can just say, hey, Grandma, I'd love to talk with you about your stories, you know. Sometimes your grandma's like, I don't really want to talk about my childhood, but how about grandparents? Like, you kind of a little bit go peripheral to get the information if there's resistance. Like respect the resistance, because they may not want to share the stories, some of the stories especially, but build the connection. This guy Murray Bowen did this family systems work, intergenerational work I studied in the 80s. So that's kind of some of like, I started interviewing my aunts, like, but it has to follow from your intuition, from your calling and your interest. And then your rapport with that. And it also helps build rapport if they're open to actually having a conversation. More adults, and the connection. Yeah. And it repairs the loneliness. We go back to the loneliness and the isolation. It's like, what repairs that is transparency. Yeah.
And how, you mentioned also like part of your exploration has been through psychedelics. So how practical is that? As opposed to going, like, is it complementary to going and talking to them? That one can use psychedelics and use that realm to actually continue that exploration? And can it replace actually talking to people that are alive, or is it
I would say it's complementary. You know, I mean, the more we journey in, whether it's Huachuma, which has been San Pedro, which is one of my favorite medicines, or it's ayahuasca, or it's psilocybin, can help us journey more deeply and access somatically, access images and memories. And so I think that's complementary. I think they're two different channels. One is a little more rational. It's like more like, hey, can you tell me about the story? When was the migration? What was the profession of grandpa? Like, did they enjoy that? How was the family fed? What kind of food? I mean, food is always a good way to find out. And so we have to sort of soften the approach if they're resistant to telling the stories. But many want to tell the stories. They just haven't necessarily been asked. So, yeah.
So before we close, is there anything else that you want to share that we haven't covered before we open for questions and discussion?
I just appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too, man. I really appreciate you being able to walk us through a heavy topic like this with a lot of lightness.
Yeah. That's important, right? That's really important. Like, my defiance is like, I won't give my joy up for anyone. Like, nope, despair doesn't get it. Nothing fucking gets my joy. It's gonna stay. And I really encourage us all that we need joy in the world. We need that light, you know, and gravity and levity. I mean, the heaviness isn't something to avoid, although it's understandable that we avoid, right, the intense stuff. So it's a mixture, isn't it?
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks so
I
much.
really appreciate the work that you do and the knowledge that you have and your willingness to share it with the world. Where can people find you? Where can people explore more of your topics? I know you have a library of videos and
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of writing. Where can people find you? And
Yeah.
do
So my
you exist?
website is shiftinperspective.com, and I have a YouTube channel that I've expressed all these generational ancestry stories. I've told my ancestor stories in video on YouTube. And I've done these ancestry councils that are this basically, but interactive, so that we're all sharing our stories and deeply listening to one another. And I'm in San Leandro, the Dro, down in south of Oakland, and you find me on the dance floor somewhere as well. So if that's your want. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Vulcan. Thank you, Mark.
Up next on the Human Recovery Lab.
The bottom fell out. All of a sudden, I'm in conflicts with my partner about things. This just isn't feeling right anymore with my community. And you may love this version of yourself that is so embedded in these patterns, but you're not going to grow to your fullest potential in this life. I see that closed door and I really want to open it. And there is calling and a commitment. I went down to Peru by myself, and I get there, and my teacher, who's on dialysis at the time, is, "Do you want to drink ayahuasca?" And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And he's, yeah, let's drink ayahuasca. And so we did. And when you ingest that, along with the other contexts that you're a part of, with no oil and salt, abstaining from much social contact, and you're drinking ayahuasca every few days, what starts to happen is you start to connect with the essence or the spirit of that plant. And it brings you wisdom about yourself. It also will clean and transform your body and your psyche and your embodied subconscious.
You mentioned the word entheogens. What are they exactly?
Entheogens is speaking to the category of mind-altering substances. So it can include ayahuasca, peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD. And one of those things that we can learn from the indigenous traditions is something around patience, humility, and our Western mind gets so focused on achieving. What I'm seeing now in the movement that's kind of concerning is...
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm your host, Omar Shaker. The music you heard was composed live by Vulcan Aaron. Huge shout out to Omar Adib and Mustafa Lazabi, our audio team, as well as Daniel Kaheka and Apricot, our video editors, Veronica Fields for her support in the studio, and Mark Wagenseal on percussion. Follow the Human Recovery Lab on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and get our latest updates on thehumanrecoverylab.com.